another edition of the Sidelines Pass. I am Chris Courtney, alongside Baxter Colburn and Joshua Thompson, my fellow senior writers at Sidelines. We will be discussing today on episode 4.1 the NFL draft and kind of recapping the draft and what happened in the past week. Obviously, lots of news coming out of the draft. Big winners, big losers. People have opinions on who the steals and who the busts in the draft, and then of course there's been news even as early as or as recent as today with Dante Fowler going down with a season-ending knee injury, what we suspect is a season-ending knee injury at least, in rookie minicamp today. So lots to get to. Gentlemen, we'll start with the Dante Fowler injury. A devastating injury for sure, not only Fowler, but the Jaguars who drafted him with the number 3 overall pick in this year's draft. A guy who they thought was going to be probably one of their primary edge presences this season. A guy who was rated as one of the top pass rushers in this draft, coming out of the University of Florida. The Jags had a lot of positive momentum kind of heading into this draft and now heading into the 2015 season. That has been quelled a little bit with Fowler's injury. And it's a little bit disheartening, I guess, for a team that has been looking for something, a ray of hope here for at least a few years. It's tough to see them kind of being competitive again this season immediately, especially without the Fowler injury. But you would have suspected, hey, another young player in, get him some experience, and then maybe another year from now or two, they could be ready to contend. Guys, just digesting the information and kind of taking it in. Josh, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Baxter. What is just your general opinion and take from the Fowler injury today, and kind of what that means for the Jaguars moving forward?
Essentially, the biggest thing that this means for the Jaguars is that he just invested a lot of money in something that fell apart very quickly. But even still, in a sense, you still have to make a 53-man roster. You can't base the whole team off of one guy. So the biggest thing that they can look at in this outcome is that they still have this kid for another 3 years. So yeah, let him sit out the season, which he should be doing in the first place, which any rookie should be doing, unless you're James Winston on the Buccaneers. Sit out that season, heal properly, and then just bounce back from it. While that's going on for the Jags, just sit there and look at, okay, what else did we get from the draft? They definitely got a few good picks in there, and they're still building as a team. Granted, they might not be in Jacksonville in a couple of years, but that doesn't matter. They're still a football team. They're still got a so it's just all about how they treat the rest of that roster.
In all honesty, this is huge. Yeah, this is a huge loss for Jacksonville. Anytime a first-round draft pick gets hurt the first day of training camp, it's going to be devastating for the team. The Jaguars wouldn't have drafted him if it wasn't an immediate need they wanted filled. And you look at a guy like him out of the University of Florida, a premier pass rusher in college football, and people were really excited to see what he could do. And he was staying pretty close to home as well by going to Florida and then going right to Jacksonville. And seeing him get hurt is huge. There's still, I don't think, any official word on what his injury, like how long he's going to be out. I've heard mixed rumors about ACL and MCL. From my experiences with it in the past, it's not a very short recovery process. I really hope that they take the precautions needed to get him back, because I understand he wants to play immediately. I totally understand that coming out of college. Anybody wants to do that, but don't rush him back. Let him heal appropriately and then get him on the field once he has had a full recovery. And I think he will be a really good addition for the Jaguars. And even looking through their draft class this year too, they drafted a lot of really key players that I think will help their team continue to grow in the very near future.
Yeah, just evaluating kind of what they did in the draft, it's hard not to be impressed with kind of the needs that they address for their team. They've got a lot of needs to address, and so I guess it makes sense to see them kind of fill those needs with players who are kind of big names, or at least names that you recognize that get into college football. Is there? Hindsight always is 20/20, and you can always second guess things. But I guess is there a part of you, is there a valid part of you that thinks, man, maybe we should have taken a defensive lineman instead, taking a Leonard Williams at number 3 instead of Fowler? Is there any lingering, did you have any lingering thoughts about the Fowler pick at the time? Not necessarily because of his injury history or anything like that, but just in general about the pick, that makes you think, they really should have gone with Williams instead of Fowler at number 3 at that position. Go ahead, Josh, and then Baxter.
Okay, so I touched on this a little bit a couple weeks ago about the health of players and being able to properly study them before you go to actually draft them. I have a guy back here at home. His name's Austin Einhorn, and he's a strength and conditioning coach. He actually studies a lot on the health and proper movement of players. And I quote you that he says that if some team were to take him on, he'd be able to tell you in the top 20 picks of which players are going, of how likely a player is going to be injured, not if they're going to be injured, how likely, and of what the type of injury that they could be having. And you have to kind of look at it like this. Fowler plays a position that means a lot of coming off the edge, and that injury, when it happened, it probably was a little bit improper mechanics. So if you kind of think about, we should have drafted this player, well, you probably would have drafted a different player in the same exact way based on performance, and not necessarily the little bitty things like how a player moves, the style in which they move, their way that they explode off of their hips. Things that aren't really thought about as far as the health or long term of a player and how older they are. So, yeah, maybe they would have said, should have drafted Williams, should have drafted. Maybe they're thinking we should have drafted a running back, should have drafted Curly. But overall, you have to kind of think about it like this. You're going to take a chance no matter who you pick. And I'll say that once, I'll say it again. You could be the last guy in the NFL draft being picked, Mr. Relevant, and there's still a likelihood of you getting injured. Maybe it's an accident, maybe it's not. You can't go into this hindsight if you're an accident. So you have to sit there and say, well, we had an experiment. We went with we stuck to our plan. That part of the plan didn't work, but we still have the rest of the plan to adjust it.
I think, honestly, kind of going exactly kind of off of what he was saying. No matter which way you look at it, sports is such a weird industry that, you could be, the first round pick, you could be the 7th round pick. You could get hurt the first day of practice no matter what. We see NFL veterans get hurt, first day of practice all the time. I mean, that was a need they needed. They were trying to address their defense. Obviously, they were 2-14 last year. There was many questions about the defense. Whether it would have been, Dante Fowler or, Jameis Winston or Amari Cooper, anybody, no matter who they would have drafted first day or literally any team, injuries like that are bound to happen. It's a type of injury that is common for that style of position to play. You're using your legs far more than you are most of the other positions because of how much demand you need to use to be able to push by that other guy in front of you. It's going to be difficult, obviously. I mean, you have a player like him that was promised, so much. He was going to be a huge, huge asset to the Jacksonville defense. But in all honesty, stuff like this unfortunately happens every day, and Jacksonville just needs to be able to prove how good of a team they really are now without their number 1 player.
Go ahead, John.
They notice an interesting trend that NFC South is now 2 for 2 in picking injured defensemen right off the rip. So maybe there might be a continuing trend. Who knows who will be next, but maybe they'll kind of learn from this going forward.
It's bad juju in the AFC South.
Yeah, no kidding. That whole division's messed up, though, so.
Well, the whole injury brings up an interesting question, too, and something I want to ask you guys is with that injury kind of happening so far in advance of the season, I guess, does it place, or does it make you question, I guess, the importance of rookie mini camps? I mean, is it something that is really even necessary? We're sitting here May 8th, and the Jaguars just lost, kind of their prized pick, and a guy that they expected to be kind of a force this season in some capacity, even if it's just a contributor and giving them valuable reps on defense. He is, for all intents and purposes, going to be out for the season. Does the NFL need to kind of look at maybe rookie minicamps and just the off-season kind of activities that teams go through and change that up? I mean, it is football at the end of the day, so you know what you're signing up for. But at the same time, does it still make sense to have these off-season activities so far in advance of the season where it's like you kind of wonder, what are you really getting out of it? Go ahead, Josh, and then Baxter.
So there are multiple reasons why you have to have minicamp. First things first, when you talk about, when I started talking about minicamp, that whole thing, you got to get rid of the bad habits early. And that's the whole point of the rookie minicamp. You want to see, okay, what am I going to be working with? Who are we going to be able to shore up? Who are we going to say, okay, kind of maybe on who just this guy's definitely not going to cut it simply because of, and it's not just body mechanics. And we're talking about day-to-day out activities, what they do as they try to bring together this brotherhood of guys that they're going to have to be together for a good 16, 17 weeks during the season. That's a good 4.5, almost 5 months that you're going to have to be rooming with someone, that you're going to have to be sharing your life with, that you're going to be sharing shower areas with. There's a lot of things that have to come together. So you have to make sure and weed out enough of the bad habits, enough of the bad juju, if you will, out of those rookies before you bring them in. Because you bring in, I'll make a boxing metaphor. You can't just take some random scrapper off the street and toss him into the ring and expect him to ultimately perform, even if he's been knocking guys out. I mean, we got a couple guys in the NFC who were prime examples of that. NFC, UFC, they're prime examples of that. And it's the same thing with these rookie mini camps. Yes, injuries happen, but it's a contact sport. You're going to get injured some way, somehow, at some point in time in life. If you don't, either you're Mr. Incredible Superman or something like that, you're definitely going to get injured. So I don't think that this should be a knock on the minicamps. I don't think the NFL should look at this as something along the lines of concussions. I would say that maybe they should lengthen and start guaranteeing some spots right on as rookies, so that way they're not going as hard trying to kill themselves out on the field just to make a loss so that they're not sure if they can.
Well, I mean, in complete honesty, I think rookie minicamps are probably one of the most important things for an NFL for the NFL teams as they continue to build their programs, because let's face it, ESPN, everybody overbills almost every single player, undervalues every single player leading up to the draft, and coaches need to be able to have that time with those players and say, okay, enough of what Mel Kiper's 83,000 mock drafts say about you. I really just want to see what you can do on the field, without the other guys here. I mean, this is kind of like a second Senior Bowl for some of these guys because they have to go in front of these NFL coaches and prove themselves again. And I honestly think, especially with a team like Jacksonville, just staying with them as the theme, they've got a lot of openings next year on both sides of the ball. Coaches want to know, okay, if we just drafted T.J. Yeldon, is he going to be a guy that can jump in as a starter right away? Are we going to stick with Toby Gerhart? What exactly are we going to do there? I mean, these teams need to be able to have this time before they bring in the other players to really see what they're getting, so that they go into training camp in the summer with a full picture saying, all right, we know that this guy's going to be a consistent player. Well, this guy didn't really show up too well. We know he was overhyped, he was underhyped, and coaches can also address that going into the draft next year, saying, well, this is kind of how this worked out for us. But I can see both sides of the argument where it's saying, well, we don't want them getting hurt in May, like you guys said. Why now? Dante Fowler's a prime example. He's done for the year. I mean, he's hurt May 8th. The season's still 3 months away. That obviously kills Jacksonville, but at the same time, how is Jacksonville going to get a full understanding of how good of a player he really was at the pro level without running him through all these camps now? And I think that is absolutely crucial, and they need to keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's an interesting debate, too. You had 2 other players get injured today at rookie minicamp, both from the Carolina Panthers, and Shaq Thompson and Devin Funchess. Both of that team's 2 top picks, too. Not as serious as Fowler's, but Thompson went down with a hamstring injury. Funchess had left with severe cramps and had to be actually carted off the field.
It's a great last name, by the way.
It does. What's that?
I think that's a great last name, Funches. I don't know. Anyway, just had to say that for a second. I was like, that's a great last name.
Right? Is that a reason why you think the Carolina Panthers took him in the second round?
They're like, you know what? We need some really cool last names around here. It's funny that you say that, though, because how many times have we seen NFL teams sell jerseys of really weird last name players? Because people just want the jersey of that weird player for that last name, regardless of how good or bad they are. They're like, hey, that's a cool last name. I want that on a jersey.
That Funches is going to be a popular jersey.
Probably, in all honesty. Especially if he produces, hopefully, if he does, live up to the hype.
We'll switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the biggest winners and losers coming out of the NFL draft. I want each of you guys to kind of give me, in your opinion, who you feel had the best draft and then who maybe didn't have the best draft. We'll go with Baxter first and then Josh, and just break down kind of the team that you feel had the best and worst draft.
Well, for me, in all honesty, I will try to stay unbiased as a Green Bay Packer fan, born and bred. I think the Packers had an okay draft. They're not one of my best ones or not, just as a side note for you guys. I did think it was interesting, though, looking at Jacksonville and looking at Cleveland. I think both of those players, if you look at the amount of draft picks that Cleveland had and Tampa Bay, Tampa Bay had 13 draft picks. They, 12 out of those 13 guys were offensive players, so they definitely helped address all those issues. Hopefully, we'll find out, in all honesty, but, they took as much time as they needed to help address all of that. Cleveland, they were a little concerning to me, in all honesty. I know a lot of draft experts have given them high grades on their draft, but their first two picks were a little confusing, in all honesty, taking Danny Shelton and then also taking Cameron Irving. We'll kind of see exactly what happens with them, but they addressed a lot of issues on their team. They were struggling on both sides of the offense and defensive line. Wide receivers, Josh Gordon, who knows what's going on with him for the rest of his career. So they end up going and drafting a guy from there, and their defense wasn't too terrible last year, honestly. I think a lot of people forget about that. Joe Hayden, one of the better cornerbacks in the league, they had a few more players to help him out on the defensive side of the ball. So Tampa Bay and Cleveland for sure are my winners, in all honesty, and then losers, it's difficult because I think I'm more questioning of the one pick more than anything with the Denver Broncos when they drafted Shane Ray, in all honesty. And this is, I'm sure, pure coincidence, but the fact that you bring in a guy that has had issues with marijuana, you draft him to the one state where it's legal, so you're almost giving him an opportunity to make an even more mistake. And I understand he came out and said that, I'm fine, I've taken care of my issues, I made a bad decision. Totally get all of that. And they do have good players from him to learn from, with DeMarcus Ware and then Von Miller. So they've got two big guys from him to learn from. But at the same time, it's hard to really gauge a team like Denver or New England because they don't have a lot of draft needs. So at the same time, though, I wasn't thoroughly thrilled with Denver as a whole. So that would probably be one of my lower teams. So what do you got?
As far as I know, Atlanta had a pretty darn good draft class. They're trying to fill in some really big holes right now in their offense, so they're definitely trying to reproduce some weapons, but they're also trying to shell up their defense, and I really appreciated that they got Vic Beasley. It was noted that he was a beast on the outside and could be injured just the same, so kids, just don't get too ahead of yourselves. But definitely they're a team that got beat on the outside quite often, and I think that as Atlanta looked to say, how can we help out Matty Ice, the best thing was to shore up the defense, because he can put up tons of points with the weapons that he has, but it was more of Atlanta saying we need to make sure that the other team doesn't try to do the same, so we're not going to try to turn this into a shootout. We're actually going to be a complete team. So I think that as far as the best, and I think some of the smartest, Atlanta definitely did a great job there. I didn't really have a worse, considering that all I was really concerned about in the draft was who the Raiders were drafting. But at the same time, there are a few teams out there who I'm waiting to see how they'll bounce out of the draft. And the most interesting pick, I would say, not the worst, the most interesting pick was that number 2 pick, Tennessee and Mariota. I just, as much as we wrote off the number 2 pick being Mariota and Tennessee not using that pick to pick a quarterback, they now did it, and so now we're saying to ourselves, what is the next step for this team?
Yeah, no, I agree, and I mean, being an Oregon fan, that was certainly a very intriguing pick to see Mariota go to the Tennessee Titans because, fit-wise, I don't know if he's the greatest fit, but at the same time, I think that Tennessee doesn't really have a whole lot of options at this point. And that's not really a knock on Zach Mettenberger. I'm just talking about just their team in general. They don't really have anything to hang their hat on at this point. So that it was almost kind of that was almost like a default pick. I felt like they needed to make. They had to take Marcus Mariota at that position. You worry about maybe his development and how ready he is to contribute right away to the Titans. Ken Wisenhunt isn't gonna cut any corners with him. He's gonna expect a lot out of a guy like Marcus Mariota his first season. You can almost think that he's gonna be the starter in year one. So there's a lot of pressure there building, I think, for Mariota. But no, I agree. That was a very intriguing pick, and I think the Titans did well for themselves. I think getting Mariota a weapon like Dorial Green-Beckham in the second round, who I think is a guy who sat out all of last year after transferring from Missouri to Oklahoma. You don't know exactly what you're going to get with him. He's got some off-field baggage that you got to deal with, but maybe it's professional locker room will help him overcome something. You never know. The Titans are an interesting team for sure this year. I actually really I like some of the choices that you guys came up with as far as who a little bit of props to Josh, because I think that not only did they get kind of maybe one of the best values in the first round for their pick of Amari Cooper, but I think they did a really good job of addressing defense with Mario Edwards in the second round. So, well done by the Raiders. Good job. We'll see if they can do something with it.
Yeah. I do want to say one thing fast. Sorry, no, I was, not to interrupt, I was looking really fast because I was looking through the USA Today draft guide that they came out with, and it's ironic that the team that got the worst grade was the Seattle Seahawks. They got a D out of all 32 teams, but at the same time, it was like I was mentioning before, they didn't have a lot of needs, in all honesty, but the article that I was reading about it said that there was maybe one or two players in the whole class that they really did need, but everybody else is kind of developmental. I honestly was pushing that the Seahawks needed to go out and draft a bunch of wide receivers because Doug Baldwin is not the answer. College receivers over Doug Baldwin any day, honestly. So personally, that's who I would have taken with my 30. With their first pick would have been a high wide receiver, but I'm not Pete Carroll, and I decided to call on run.
Oh, shots fired at Seattle.
Yeah. Just saying,
And Chris, you're saying that during this draft that the Titans were on auto pick?
A little bit. I mean, not completely. I'm not saying that they just were blindfolded and they were just necessarily that was the only choice they had to make. They could have gone Leonard Williams or a different direction and invested in Zach Mettenberger. I just think that it's interesting because you see teams do this every once in a while. I feel like is they feel like they need to take this guy at this position.
Well, I mean, if ESPN's saying it, they must have to, right?
It's Wisenhunt's. I don't think Mariota fits Wisenhunt's model for what he wants in a quarterback. I think if Wisenhunt is willing to adapt to Mariota's game, I think it's a good fit. But he hasn't really shown that in the past, and so that's why, as a Duck fan and who's just very protective of Marcus Mariota because he is Jesus in cleats.
Wow. I think as a Badger fan, I could say the same thing about Melvin Gordon as a Badger fan, but that's just me, you know.
Not to get too far off.
Jesus in cleats. Oh, my Lord.
Oh my gosh. Just put plug in him. Put plug in him, he's done. He's done.
Who's got the Heisman? That's all I'm asking. Is who's got
Oh, okay.
Tim Tebow's got the Heisman. He's not Jesus in cleats.
Jameis Winston, I mean, I'm a Knowles fan. I'm not an alumni, but I'm always for anything that comes out of Florida State. Let me tell you right now, I'm still trying to figure out what happened to E.J. Manuel.
Yeah, right?
we all? Yeah.
He wasn't horrible, but he wasn't great either.
He wasn't great, and I don't think he should have started. But that's a completely different topic. And then we're talking about Jameis now, number one overall. He's going to Tampa Bay. I just hope that he has enough around him to do that. But, I mean, forget about those guys. I mean, if you're Mariota, okay, let's really talk about what you're trying to create quarterback competition. Make that quarterback better. And that's all that says to me, because if you really needed other weapons and you decided to create some quarterback controversy, just to go completely opposite of what everyone was saying, you're not drafting him and then they draft him. That was either a ploy to try to throw off other teams in the draft, because if you look at the number of people that said that Mariota was probably going to go later on in the draft, that threw off everyone's draft selections. That, or they were trying to show up your quarterbacks. You probably didn't think anyone else was better out there to have develop at the quarterback position, which you actually could have drafted a lot later and picked up a late quarterback or an undrafted rookie in order to do that in the first place. Or you're trying to look for trade prospects later on. You're trying to build them up, make him make your name for himself, say, oh yeah, he really is NFL ready, and then have some team trade for him like before the season starts.
Yeah, no, it's again, I'm curious about how that's going to pan out for both sides, because it is kind of a weird and interesting place for the Titans to pick a quarterback who maybe isn't the right fit for them and their scheme. We've only got just a couple minutes left, so real quickly, guys, I want you guys to give me your opinion on the player who's kind of going to make GMs across the league regret passing on him in this draft. Is there one player that each of you guys has your eye on this upcoming season? About 3 minutes left. Josh, go first, then Baxter.
I got three, actually. Sorry to steal thunder here, but I got Rashad Green, Florida State, not because he's an alum, just because I've seen him work all season, and I think that really should have got just a little bit higher. I think he's going to be really solid wide out this year. You got Jalen Strong out of Arizona State, watching a lot of Pac-12 football, and I think that kid's definitely going to make some moves. And oh my God, did I not tell you before? Todd Gurley, number 16.
Overrated.
So those are the guys I got as impact players from this draft class.
Okay. Baxter?
In all honesty, I'm going to have to play the not biased card in all honesty, but I honestly think that Melvin Gordon is going to make a massive impact for the San Diego Chargers this year, honestly, because they trade away, Ryan Matthews, which is fine. He wasn't that great to begin with, but you look at Melvin Gordon, arguably the best running back in the draft. I mean, you can look at Todd Gurley any way you want to, but Melvin Gordon had a fantastic season to begin with. He had a fantastic college career as a whole. So I think Melvin Gordon will be huge, in all honesty, to help complement what they've got going on out there. And then you can kind of look around at a lot of different players, but nobody else really jumps out at me. And you can make arguments for Bryce Petty and Garrett Grayson and saying maybe they shouldn't have gone as late as they did. But at the same time, look at who the Green Bay Packers drafted in the 5th round. They go and grab Brett Hundley. So, in all honesty, any good player can drop at any time. So I'll be really curious. I'm really hoping that I always love hearing those 5th to 7th round guys that end up having breakout years. So I don't have a specific guy in mind, but I'm cheering for that story again this year because I always love hearing those guys that ESPN was like, oh, they're not very good, but then they come out and have a blowout year, and everyone's like, whoa, they're so good. Like, yeah, crazy, right? So I'm cheering for the underdog this year.
Sometimes hit home runs with these late round picks. Absolutely. I'll give you guys one name, and it's another Duck, but I'm not. Again, this is not a biased pick. I think he was projected to be a first or second round talent if he didn't get injured. Ifo Ekpeolomu. I think he's going to be a player that if he can return healthy, it's going to be a big time player for Cleveland. That's about it, fellas. We'll wrap this up. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to the Sidelines Pass. We will be back again very soon with another edition. So stay tuned, and thanks for tuning in.